When I speak in organizations to groups or with individuals in coaching and talk about this inner stuff, and sometimes I'll share the stuff in my mind, and people maybe start to share the stuff that's in their minds, you can see them looking around thinking, oh, and some people will come to me afterwards and say, I thought that was just me.
Hello everybody, thank you for joining us on today's podcast. This podcast is one interview that's divided into two episodes because it's quite long. It's an interview with organisational psychologist Ross McIntosh. I've done a lot of work with Ross on a process called ACT. We now implement it into the workplace thanks to the expert guidance of Ross. So this episode will be full of insights onto how the human mind works, how it can get in our way in the workplace and in our personal lives, and what you can do to get past it. So be sure to listen in, hear Ross's story, and find out more about the human mind and what you can do to make it your ally, not your enemy.
3, 2, 1, yeah!
On the Better Happy podcast, we are looking for the answers to the question, how do people-focused, passionate business leaders, owners, and people leaders drive for exceptional results in their organizations while supporting the health and happiness of their people and without causing burnout? I'm delighted today to have with me Ross McIntosh, who I've known for quite some time now and has been a key player really in the evolution of some of the things that we do at Better Happy, through sharing his insights, wisdom, and through just generally being a supportive and top guy. Thank you for joining us, Ross, I should say first.
Pleasure to be here, Mike. I'm super excited.
So am I. We love that. We have some fantastic conversations. I know this is going to be of tons of value to people listening. A little overview of Ross then. So I've done some digging on Ross and his long history, right? So I'm gonna give you my overview and I'm gonna read your facial expressions to see if I'm right, and if you start pulling faces, I know I'm off track. So you started your professional career probably around 1991 working in the Home Office.
Yeah.
Making you feel old now, aren't I?
Yeah, ancient, mate. Yeah.
Yeah. So 1999 working in the Home Office, and from then to now, actually, you've had quite a bit of involvement with government and different departments within the government. I did notice, however, that you do seem to have, from an early stage, been dipping into roles around people. So you got involved in the investors in people, you got involved in HR business partnering, you jumped over to Department for Trade and Department for Business. And again, I see a pattern of looking at how you can help people within those roles. Around 2015 then, you had to jump over to a more definitive role in coaching and psychology. So I think you had your first business then, or you were a partner in a business in 2015, coaching psychology?
It was kind of just me as an independent, yeah.
Cool. Then you had a stint at Better Up, which is still going now, so putting coaching into organizations. And then from 2015 as well, you were also involved doing lecturing at the University of London, working with the likes of Paul Flaxman. I know who you've worked with on ACT and ACT in the Workplace, which is something that we'll talk about today. And I think did he author the Mindful Employee? He did,
the Mindful and Effective Employee. Him alongside Frederick Livheim and Frank Bond.
So you're in the crew. You're in with the people that are doing good stuff in organizations, and we'll go into ACT. But for me, I've experiences living in monasteries and studying mindfulness. And when I discovered ACT, acceptance, commitment, training, or therapy, as we like to call it, that for me was like, oh my God, this is the way that this will work in the business place. It kind of brings structure and sanity to the Eastern philosophy of mindfulness and makes that very practical and applicable. So we're definitely going to dig into that. And then also, most importantly, you've got People Soup, which is your consultancy and your podcast, which has been going for, is it longer than 5 years now? 8 years?
Probably the roots were about 8 years, but seriously engaging probably about 6-7 years. Yeah.
And what series and episode are you on of that podcast, Ross?
Oh my gosh, I'm on season 5. I like to think of myself as like a Netflix extravaganza, but I'm on season 5, episode 24, I think.
Wow. So been putting content out for quite a long time, and that's all around helping people flourish in the workplace. And it's a fantastic podcast. And he has some amazing guests, I should say.
Yeah, like you, man.
Yeah, because I've been on your podcast, so of course I'm going to say that. But yeah, please do connect with and follow Ross, and we'll on LinkedIn and his social media. But we'll touch on that again at the end. But Ross, that's a big introduction. Tell us a little bit about yourself. Why have you always had this interest in people? Why have you found your way into psychology and coaching? Should mention that you're a organizational psychologist as well. It's just a little thing.
Yeah. Blimey. Thanks, Mike, for that lovely introduction and very thorough. Blimey. When you started out saying 1991 in the Home Office, it's like, shit, what's he found? But yeah, all correct. And yeah, like you say, I'm a freelance organizational psychologist and have been for about the last 8 years or so. Like you say, well, maybe if I go back a bit, decades ago, I did my first degree up in Dundee, and I was accepted to do physiology because I was kind of interested in the human body, how all that works. And because it was a Scottish university, you did do a 4-year course. So I took as one of my options in the first year psychology. Really liked it, really liked thinking about how we develop as social beings, and was really interested in developmental psychology, actually. And ended up switching my degree to psychology and really enjoyed that. Then, as you say, went into the civil service and loved it. What a varied career I had in the civil service. And you're right, there was lots of stuff around supporting people, training people, helping people to, I guess I started out training people how to use a new computer system back in the day when computers weren't a thing in workplaces. We used to write letters with a piece of carbon paper in between them.
And there's definitely people that will listen to this that can't comprehend that or can't fathom that.
I know. And we didn't have a computer. We had one per floor, and each floor was probably about 300 people. And that was to look up landing cards I worked in immigration at the beginning. So yeah, I've seen quite a transformation in the workplace. And I was always fascinated by the structures, leadership, hierarchies, how we relate to each other, how we can get in our own way in the workplace. Still am quite an anxious person. I was an anxious child, always really nervous about what other people might think of me, if I was going to get something wrong, if I was going to get told off. And that's still with me today, although I've found many different ways to relate to that sort of stuff that's going on differently.
What age do you think you were aware that you were an anxious child? Is that just looking back in retrospect, or were you conscious of it when you were a child?
Gosh, brilliant question. I think probably around sort of first school. So when I first started going to school, part of me kind of wanted to be the geek in the class who knew the answers. So sometimes I might be hand up, Miss, like one of those annoying people. And sometimes I'd be really embarrassed. I was one of those people who go bright red. If the teacher said something like something terrible had happened in the class and said, no one's leaving here until someone owns up, I would be bright red like a tomato. And it was never me. Don't know why. But
were you an only child, or did you have siblings?
No, I've got an older sister, but I was always quite shy. And it's interesting you ask this, because I was quite shy, but then I would always be picked to read out in assembly.
Interesting.
Read out a poem or a book or something. So it's a kind of mixture, and I don't know.
Why do you think you were picked out to read and stuff? Were you naturally a good reader? Were you quite articulate?
I liked reading as a child, and I just used to get through loads of books. Mum used to take me to the library every week, and I'd pick out new books, and I used to love going to the school library. So I loved reading. I guess that was kind of a safe place for me.
Yeah.
And yeah, I guess the shyness continued as I went through school, and I kind of probably felt like I didn't fit in very well at school. Felt quite different.
Right.
And used to worry. I guess where the worry and anxiety came up was with exams. Oh gosh, I remember doing a science exam, and this was to determine what sort of set I would be put in. And you know, when they put the bright kids in the top set and the not so bright in the lower sets.
Yeah.
And I was more or less frozen throughout that sort of hour-long exam. I couldn't remember the simplest of things. And it was such a debilitating thing for me.
Well, sounds like you had quite a drive for achievement from a young age to you know, you said like you wanted to put your hand up and know the answers to the questions, and you wanted to, you know, that pressure of maybe not being in a high set almost.
Yeah. I guess it was drive for achievement, but also not wanting to feel sort of shame, I think. Not wanting to feel like I'd failed. And always wanting to be validated.
Yeah. And
perhaps without putting the work in.
Yeah. Yeah, right. So I think, and I think the school system does that, right? It's certainly the way it's structured. It's like, if you're academic, you're going to get looked at as being good. And if, I mean, maybe it's better now than it used to be, but if you're not academic, then you're a failure, you know, and we're going to tell you that by putting you in a low grade class. So all the kids that have got dyslexia, maybe they're going to be told from a very young age that they are not good compared to everybody else, which is not a great environment for children, and something that I think may be changing, maybe going the opposite way, but who knows. But so you were obviously articulate and intellectual from a young age. You like reading, which I think is one of the most important things you can do for a child, like get them into reading. Why not do that? But also from a young age, recognize that you were quite anxious. And would you say you're a thinker? Say you're a deep thinker? Think a lot?
Deep thinker, I'm not sure. Overthinker, hell yeah. Overthinking about all the potential things that could go wrong, or the disastrous consequences of what would happen if I, for instance, if I didn't pass that exam. I always say to people, I think I come from a long line of catastrophizers.
Which has got its benefits, right? Because if we didn't have catastrophizers, then we would all just be like the dodos jumping off cliffs and not still be here. So there's definitely benefits to having that. Like there's benefits to having people that don't sleep well, because that would have kept us alive when we were hunter-gatherers, when someone's going to walk on us.
Yeah, and I guess it's realizing when that overthinking might be useful and when it's just a pain in the ass for me. That's just like, mate, just give it a rest, will you?
And I think everybody listening to this will certainly resonate with that. I do. I know I spend a lot of time sometimes like it's a separate person in my mind, and I'm like, I need to stop listening to this, because it's getting to a point where it's unhelpful and it's debilitating.
Yeah, and I can get so engaged in that tragic outcome. And it happens in nanoseconds. I'm so good at it. It happens so quickly that I can take an everyday occurrence and escalate it to.
I had a guy on a workshop last week, actually, and we were doing labeling. So we were talking about recognizing the thoughts that you have regularly and applying labels to them. And this guy came up with the overthinking overlord. And he shared with the group a story about how he got a text. He's in a rented house with his partner, and he got a text from his landlord saying, "I'm going to pop over to see you." And he said within seconds, he was going through what him and his missus were going to do to survive, because the landlord was obviously coming around to kick them out, put them on the streets, and render them homeless. And what it came around to was the landlord wanted to come and say hello, because I've been around for a year, and just check if the house was all right. And he said, I'd lived that scenario in my mind, this kind of we're going to be on the streets, we're going to be homeless. What am I going to tell my mum? What am I going to tell my partner? Because of a text from somebody saying hello.
I've got a classic workplace one that still I can fall into. If the person senior to me, I work as an associate for a consultancy, if the head of that consultancy, or looking back over the days, if my boss said, "Oh, Ross, can I have a quick word?" Or, "Are you free to hop on a call right now?" My mind will go, holy shit.
What have I done?
I have been discovered for the fraud and the charlatan that I am. They're going to boot me out on my arse, and it's all over, mate.
It's insane, right? And I remember having a conversation with you once, and this is a moment that will stick with me for life, actually. So I'd done some work with other psychologists, and then I'd found you, and we were talking about the ACT matrix, which we'll talk about on this call shortly. And I remember you sharing with me, I think it was you cycling. No, in fact, it was you writing papers. You showed me an example about, oh, here's how I figure out, here's an example how I navigate my mind when I'm thinking about writing papers. And you went through the scenario and you explained how, you know, you see yourself as being this confident, diligent, professional writer, and you've definitely got the history and the experience to be able to do that. But then you have all these inner demons and all these inner voices that are telling you nobody's going to read them and nobody's going to like them, and why bother, and just put it off. And I remember, even though I've lived on monasteries and studied mindfulness and lived with monks, and they've, you know, I've heard this message over and over again that, you know, you get negative thoughts as part of being a human being. I remember hearing it from you, and I don't know why, it just really made the penny drop with me. And I was like, I'm listening to Ross, who I really look up to as a you know, successful guy, psychologist. And he's sharing with me that he just has as much doubt as any other human being on the planet. And I think for me, something just changed then. It was like, do you know what? I don't think I need to fix this thing in me anymore. I don't need to get rid of these negative thoughts. They're just part of being a human. And I don't know why, when I heard it from you, it just made the penny drop. And I would say my life has been significantly better from that moment, because that's I think sometimes you have to hear the same message 30 times before it sinks in. And for some reason, when I heard it from you, it sunk, and I just made peace with, you've got all of this self-doubt. It's not valid. It's not justified. And you just got to learn to let it play out and carry on past it.
Wow. That's lovely to hear. And yeah, how many of us are going round weighed down by those thoughts and treating them as if they're 100% true and 100% worthy of our full attention? It's exhausting.
It is exhausting, right? Unless we create a healthy relationship with it. And I think this should be taught in schools, but certainly should be taught at management and leadership levels, because I think before you get to a management or leadership level, the situations and scenarios that you face can not let these voices rear themselves up as much as they do when you're in a leadership and management position. Typically, when you're in a leadership and management position, two things you're going to have to do that you probably didn't have to do before is make high-level decisions that bring with it the risk of failure and mistakes, and go into conflict with people. You're going to have to do those two things. And when you have to do those two things, all of a sudden these voices that you've got can get really, really loud. And I think that's why so many people struggle once they get to more senior positions, or once they start pursuing big goals, because it's like, oh, this stuff's getting loud. I'll just go back to where I was before, where stuff's safe. But back to you for a moment then, Ross. So what do you think led to you doing, was it physiology? And then what led to you then shifting to do psychology? What do you think made you interested in those areas?
Good question. I mean, physiology, I was curious about. I really liked biology at school. I was curious about the body, how it works, all the systems, making sense of that. But then I thought, oh God, how do we make sense of the mind and human behavior? And got really so interested in that, from how language develops to how children develop to what happens when things go wrong, and just super geeked out on it, and was relating it to myself, relating it to people around me, and just thinking, gosh, this is so interesting.
When you started shifting over to psychology, did you have an idea of what you were going to do with these skills, or did you just want to learn them? Did you have like a vision of where you wanted to go with it in the future, or was it just, I really like this?
It was really just, I like this, it's interesting, and didn't have a clue about the future.
Yeah.
Never really had those conversations. It sounds really weird to say this, but kind of never really had those conversations about what will you do when you finish.
And I think there's an element of that, right, when you're young, that, you know, some people have traumatic childhoods, and then they figure out that they want to, you know, fix these things and these injustices, or they're really clear on a vision. But I think for a lot of people, childhood should just be find stuff you love and do more of that, and then let that take you on the path that you're meant to go on. So what do you think led to you? Because like I said, in your history, there's this kind of common trend of moving towards, regardless of where you've been. So I'm looking down at my notes here, like even in the home office, where you could do a variety of things, you can see this pattern of you doing like investors in people and HR business partnering. So you can see this pattern of you moving into doing bits that help people. You've done you've shifted over to doing a degree in psychology, and in the workplace you keep shifting towards doing things that help people, obviously leading to where you are today. What do you think led to that? What was you doing in the home office that made you think, oh, I'd like to do the investors and people piece?
Oh, because that
It was
one
only about 30 years ago, so it should be easy to remember, right? Sorry.
Yeah, I think I could see the value in reaching for that investors and people standard. God, I haven't thought. You're right. I haven't thought about this for bloody ages, but I could see the value in that and the how it could be used as a lever to drive better behavior, better environments for people to work in, making work more enjoyable, less challenging, more satisfying, perhaps.
So
Also,
how old were you when you started the home office?
oh goodness me,
Roughly.
probably like 21.
So you're about 21, and so you've just said there a few things. You said, this might make work more enjoyable and less challenging. When did you start to maybe become aware that it wasn't as good as it could be or should be?
Oh, I think that was probably a sort of incremental thing. It's kind of a thing that was almost a slow burn. Thinking about, well, how can I introduce this new computer system? How can I help people understand that and how it'll support them in what they do? How can I train people in doing casework? How can I help people really understand the investors and people standards and why the hell they should go for it? Is it just a tick box? Some people are very cynical and just see it as, oh yeah, so we can get the investors and people flag flying on the building, whoop-de-doo, and then everything will just go downhill afterwards. And some areas, I absolutely believe that's what happens. They would crank it all up. I was an internal assessor, so they crank it all up and go, yeah, it's amazing here. Wheel out the people who as well say, yeah, it's amazing here. And it was sometimes digging under that, but sometimes knowing that when you left, they'd all go, phew.
So why don't you think people just do that off their own back? Why do you think it takes effort to make a workplace enjoyable and rewarding, and without accountability, we can, especially maybe more so in government departments, but I think it's common across all businesses, without kind of accountability and drive, we can kind of fall back to it being challenging or dull?
Yeah, I think it's this is cultural, but it's possibly the way we view work. Sometimes I feel that I look around and I see people who kind of check in their heart and their soul and their emotions at the front desk, and they almost become content with a repetitive kind of robotic existence and task, and don't seem really engaged and don't seem really content or happy.
So what you're leading with there, and I think this is interesting, is a big part of this problem, because the reality is a lot of people don't enjoy work. The reality is most people don't, and that's from CEO down to employee. The CEOs and the leaders and the managers are stressed and they're overworking, and a lot of the employees are disengaged. And a key thing that you just started with there is just the way that we culturally see and think about work, which actually puts a lot of the responsibility for this on the individual, right? So we just go to work and just kind of, like you said, just it's work, it is what it is, I'm just going to do it. And then that's the attitude we take towards work a lot of the time.
I think to my dad, who will still say this to me, and my mum used to say it as well, oh, Monday, tomorrow, back to the grind. And it's kind of that attitude that our work is a grind, and that's what it's supposed to be. There's no other way of looking at it. But I think
did you find that?
Yes and no. There were moments, because in the beauty of the civil service is you can move around a lot. You can do different jobs.
Yep.
And that was great, because if I felt I was just becoming stale, then I could try and apply for a different role somewhere else and learn new stuff. So I was really interested in learning. But I think there's also a level of comfort that people know what's going to happen every day, and they can go there. And like I say, it almost feels like they're checked out.
And I think there's this is in human nature, right? If you think for most of our existence, hunter-gatherers, life's pretty tough. And it made sense that if we got time to relax, which would have been rare when we had enough supplies and the weather was okay and we weren't getting attacked and all of that, I guess then it made sense for us in that time to relax and recuperate energy and be lazy as such. But rest, because of the nature of existence, was we'll work bloody hard when you don't have that time. Whereas I think in the modern world, that's not great, right? Because people go in and accept that they have to do this work to survive. And then when they go home, they're kind of, I'm just going to relax and be lazy now.
Yeah, it filters through in all areas of life, this sort of commute backwards, forwards, doing a job that's mundane, perhaps getting annoyed with people, coming home, complaining about it, and just not feeling fulfilled. And I think there's an element where we can realize our part in how we can change that. It's not for someone else to do it to us. We can play a role in that. And I think sometimes we just think, I just kind of do what I'm told. I'll be obedient and I'll not rock the boat.
Yeah, and I think that the education system is kind of designed to push that a little bit, because if you think it was designed during the industrial period, and in the industrial period we needed people that would do pretty repetitive, boring work without asking any questions and without thinking too much. I suppose it made sense that during that time, we wanted our education system to create workers that didn't ask a lot of questions and were happy to settle for boring jobs. But today we're in a very different environment. Today we're in a different world, aren't we, where businesses change quickly and the economy is innovative and creative, or needs to be innovative and creative. And for innovation and creation, we need people that are happy at work, that enjoy their work, that work collaboratively, not people that are just checked out. Because I mean, the reality is any job that you can do where you can completely check out is going to get replaced by technology, AI, or machines, right? So it's going to be kind of like up your game, or you're going to become irrelevant.
Yeah, and I think if we think about basic psychological needs, that theory of autonomy, belonging, and competence, if we have no autonomy at work, that's not good for our health. If we don't feel like we belong either to a team or to an organization, that's awful. And competence, can we see we're progressing? Can we see we're making progress in whatever we do, whether it's on a production line or learning new skills or dealing with different types of...
I went to a bird of prey rescue center once for my partner's son's birthday, and went to see the birds. And they told us that these birds in captivity, they're rescued birds. They're not just birds they go and steal. They're birds that have been injured. They bring them into the center and help them recover. But they stay there for life because they can't go back into the wild after. And they're saying that these birds live 30 to 50% longer in captivity. And I remember looking at one of these birds, maybe an osprey or something like that, sat on one of these perches with a chain with a thing stopping it flying away. And I remember thinking, the saying used to be that if you're not growing, you're dying. But actually, I think in the modern world, thanks to medicine and the improved quality of life, you can actually live longer if you're just comfortable, right? So it's, if you're not growing, you're unhappy. You can actually live longer in a comfortable existence, but you're not necessarily going to be happy. You can probably go through life less stressed if you don't push yourself and try and grow your business or grow your team or grow yourself as an individual, but you're not going to feel fulfilled. You're not going to feel happy. Tony, John Robbins has a book called Healthy at 100, and he said something. It's a long book, it's a great read, and he says something in there, and he says people aren't living longer in the modern world, they're dying longer. And I was like, ooh. And he's like, yes, if you look at lifespan, life is better. People are living for a longer period of time, but the reality is they're going into nursing homes at 50 and 60, and they're not happy, and the depression's gone up. And he's like, people are just dying longer because medicine.
Wow. That's a pretty radical way of looking at it, and it resonates. Yeah. And we've never had, in many countries in the world, we've never had such good lifestyles, yet we've never been so depressed.
Yeah, and this is the crux of it all, right? So before we get into that, because that is the crux of everything, we're in this new environment where we can thrive. I say to people whenever I go and do workshops, I'm like, put your hands in the air if you think it's hard to be healthy in the modern world. And loads of people put their hands up. And I say, okay, so if I took you back 100 years and if I took you back, 100 years and introduced you to some coal miners and got you to explain to them how life is today and how it looks and work-life balance and all that stuff, would you then tell them that it's hard to be healthy today? And they're like, maybe not. And I say the problem is in the modern world isn't that it's hard to be healthy. It's actually very easy to be healthy. The problem is it's very easy to be unhealthy. I think that's the problem, because yes, there's lots of challenges, and we've got marketing and advertising. We live sedentary lives, but we do have the option to be healthy, but we're encouraged to be unhealthy. So I think the real challenge is it's easy to be unhealthy, but it's never been easier to be healthy. So it's just this contingent got wider between the two extremes, and I think that leaves more space for stress as well, because if we're unhealthy, we know, well, I probably could do something about this, but we'll keep waking up every Monday and I'm not doing anything about it. So then I don't like myself even more. So it creates new challenges, right? But before we get into that, how did you, what made you kind of jump to go into, say, like around 2015, you've been doing all this work for the government, and then you kind of go, right, coaching psychologist. And have you've done your degree way before this, right?
I did. So I did my first degree decades ago in psychology. Then I did a master's in human resource management while I was within the government. Yeah. And in 2015, I left government to go and study for organisational psychology.
What made that jump then? So where were you at?
Right. A variety of factors. Let me try and unpick them. I loved my civil service career, and I was like head of selection and assessment for a big government department for their leadership. So I was working with external suppliers to design and deliver assessment centers, to help them identify their key talent, to promote into roles where they'd be leading big teams, responsible for big policy areas, interacting with ministers. And I loved that. And I thought, I want to know more about that. I want to develop more skills in that. And at the same time, I'm not going to get political, it felt like there were central messages coming out saying, do this for your department, roll this out. And I was saying, actually, this isn't what my department need right now. This isn't the intervention that will support them or help them. And they said, kind of do it anyway.
Well, any examples that you can remember?
Not really. Not really. I wouldn't really want to share.
Yeah, fair enough.
But it kind of made me start thinking, and what will my impact be here? I can support this, but can I impact this organization or organizations as much as I'd like? And I said to my husband one day, and I said to him, what will I be remembered for? Because I think it was a time when a couple of people had left and a couple of people had died at work. And my mind was going to, what will I be remembered for? And he said, that's easy. You won't be remembered. And for those of you who know Spanish people, they can be quite direct. And it was said with much love. And I kind of thought, well, holy shit. You know what? You're kind of right. And so that sort of set the fuse burning a couple of years prior to me leaving, thinking, well, is this it? Is this the extent to which, and I could see it spreading ahead of me as well, another 2 or 3 decades. And I was like, geez, I'm bored. I can't be creative. I can't really create an impact that I know would support people. So I left. And that was a bit of a leap into the dark, because I was the main breadwinner in our couple. I had this fabulous civil service job with this amazing pension. And I thought, oh no, I just can't. So I left and studied. So it was around wanting more creativity. It was around thinking maybe I can make more impact from outside organizations. And it was leaving thinking I was going to become a sort of expert, even more of an expert in selection and assessment in leadership.
So starting to follow that self-actualization piece, really.
Yeah.
But again, the commonality from your childhood, right? Like you were shy and nervous, but then you were still standing up and doing the talks in front of the school. And it's kind of that there's this option of comfort and the nice pension and in the civil service job, or there's your calling, your meaning, your purpose, whatever it might be. And that's more of a driving force by the sounds of it.
Yeah, it's really nice to hear you put it like that, because sometimes when you're in the midst of it, it's just like, holy shit.
What am I doing?
Yeah.
Yeah. Cool. So you jumped over to, so you wanted to make more of a difference, and you knew that psychology and it's the theme is from then until now is psychology and business, right? That's the two themes. It's or organizations, however you want to theme it. So you've stayed on that journey. What's kind of driven you to stay on those two areas? Why business? Why psychology or organizations?
Yeah, well, again, it's been a bit of a journey of exploration, because like I say, I thought I was going to become an expert, even more of an expert in selection and assessment. Did those modules at uni on my master's and thought, and then did a module with someone who's now my friend, Dr. Paul Flexman.
Yeah.
Who was talking about ACT in the workplace and human suffering at work, and how we can use this behavioral science to help people navigate the daily challenges of life.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, mic drop, whatever you want to call it. Like, geez.
I found my thing.
I found my thing. And people can tend to get quite evangelical about ACT. And I guess I was that. But also just looking at my life thinking, oh, right. Seeing how my mind perhaps held me back sometimes, seeing how I could override that sometimes, like leaving the civil service when my mind's going, what the fuck are you doing, mate? And doing it.
So for the listeners, ACT stands for Acceptance, Commitment, Therapy or Training. I think it's probably most famous for Russ Harris and the Happiness Trap. I think he's
one of the people who's made it really. He's done a fantastic job in making it accessible
to the mainstream.
The guys who kind of founded it and did the thinking are, the names have gone out of my head. People like Kirk Struzzle, Kelly Wilson, and Stephen Hayes.
Yeah,
they're the sort of collection, and Robin Walsall too. They're the sort of collection of people who, I guess, around about 20 years ago, thought, here's a third wave of a therapeutic approach that really speaks to the human condition.
So here's a hard question for you, Ross. Can you summarize ACT in a very brief couple of sentences so that people that have never heard of it before and they've heard you talking about it just then and you kind of encountered it and you're like, oh, this is my mic drop moment. How would you summarize it to a complete beginner? How would you introduce them to it if you only had a couple of sentences? No pressure.
Right. I think my kind of strapline would be, it can help people be the person they want to be a bit more often. It can help them take action in directions that have importance to them, fundamental, deep personal importance to them. It can help them move forward with small steps. It can help them notice what's going on around them in their environment, but also, equally importantly, what's going on between their ears that could get in the way of them moving towards that stuff that matters.
And I think
it helps them. This is far more than two sentences, but it helps them. It helps them also relate to that stuff that's going on in their heads. That stuff like, I'm going to be discovered. I'm not good enough. I'm stupid. It can help them relate to that stuff in different ways, allowing them to free up more energy and attention to move toward what matters as well.
And how old were you roughly when you did your ACT module with Paul Flexman?
Oh, that's a good question. Probably about mid-40s. So I was a mature student.
So you've got a rich career behind you. You've got a degree and a master's. you've working in a variety of different departments. You're a well-read individual, intelligent bloke. You've got lots of experience, and then you discover this one thing, and you're kind of like, oh, right, that's really fascinating. And I think, from my own experience and from working with so many others, the beauty of what ACT does is what you've just said. Is it makes people look at and realize that the stuff going on in their head is okay. They're completely normal for having that, and there's a way past it. Because I think a lot of people think, I know I used to, that if I want to be successful, I need to not have this stuff in my head. So I need to do enough stuff and get enough progress and learn enough things, that and meditate enough in monasteries in Thailand, that I can stop that stuff so I can make progress in my life. So I spent tons of time in my life trying to figure out how to get rid of that stuff, and also beating myself up when the stuff got louder, which as we both know makes it even louder, right? Because these negative voices of ours, they strive on energy. So if you're having self-doubt and then you start to buy into that and then get annoyed with yourself for having self-doubt, the self-doubt gets louder. Whereas what ACT tells you in a very concise way is, well, that's normal. You never get rid of it. And there's a way to create a healthy relationship with it so that you can make progress towards who you want to be. And I think so many people, and you, as we just explained, are going through life knowing that they live in this time and this environment where it's possible for you to pursue whatever goal you want to pursue. It's never been more possible than ever before. But you're not doing it because of all of these voices in your head, because of the pension, because of safety, because of security. You're not doing it. And I think we settle for safety, but on a surface level, that makes us feel good. But on a soulful level, on a subconscious level, it makes us feel this deep sense of unfulfillment. And then you find a thing that tells you, it's like the map, right? You find this little map at ACT, and it's kind of like, oh, look, you can get out of this. You're like, ta-da!
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's discovering this thing and thinking, oh, it does that normalization thing. Because when I speak in organizations to groups or with individuals in coaching and talk about this inner stuff, and sometimes I'll share, well, with groups, I will generally share the stuff in my mind. And people maybe start to share the stuff that's in their minds. You can see them looking around thinking, oh, and some people will come to me afterwards and say, I thought that was just me.
Yeah.
So if you're enjoying that conversation as much as I did, please make sure to tune into episode 2, the second half of this conversation, where we'll go further into this topic that Ross is exploring either later on this week or next Friday. Look forward to seeing you then and to sharing the rest of this incredible interview with you.
Wanna hear you go.